Bona tarda a tothom. Benvinguts al COAC. La veritat és que estem molt agraïts i satisfets en poder presentar aquest acte dels quarts premis de Manuel Solà-Morales, la quarta edició, i agraïts sobretot als organitzadors d'aquest premi, el Laboratori d'Urbanisme de Barcelona, el DUOT, del Departament d'Urbanisme de l'ETH Zurich, i el Centre Obert de l'Arquitectura. I dic que estem agraïts perquè aquest premi posa en valor, entre altres coses, i ens apropa al món de l'acadèmia, al món professional, la qual cosa creiem que és absolutament indispensable i no entenem un món sense l'altre. Són realment imprescindibles un de l'altre. I sobretot a la nostra disciplina. I, per tant, benvinguts, celebrem-ho de la millor manera possible, amb el reconeixement al premi a la millor tesi doctoral i amb la conferència del president del jurat, el professor Lampugnani. Molt bé, doncs comencem.
Gràcies, Inés, per la introducció i per recollir la iniciativa de fer aquesta conferència aquí al col·legi, amb un rehabilitat col·legi. Jo crec que per mi és la primera vegada que veig aquesta rehabilitació i em sembla com, jo li deia al Vittorio abans, que és com una inauguració. Això mateix, una inauguració múltiple sempre va bé, sí. Jo el que voldria, sobretot, era assenyalar, diguéssim, el motiu. Nosaltres que fem, diguéssim, l'Steering Committee, que fem amb el Carles Crosses i el Pep Parcerisses, sempre busquem una mica de dir, quan fem el premi, també llavors busquem que l'organització del jurat, segurament el president del jurat pugui fer una conferència en el col·legi, perquè també és una manera de reviure i de comunicar en els col·legiats, oferir-los aquesta oportunitat de que també participin en algun, no cal que vagin a l'escola, sinó que des del col·legi també puguin veure una mica com l'urbanisme i el disseny urbà va evolucionant. Diguéssim, això és una mica la intenció que teníem, pensant que el president del jurat, que sempre és una figura externa, europea, també ens explica una mica com veu el tema de l'urbanisme des de la seva perspectiva. En aquest cas, i avui tindrem el Vittorio. Jo volia només recordar que aquestes són les 4 tesis. Avui ha sigut la dreta i, per tant, les tesis van donant lloc a uns llibres i aquí una mica l'Arquia ajuda perquè també ens permet que, i això és molt estimulant, el premi té una retribució econòmica, però sobretot és la publicació d'un llibre fet amb qualitat. Per tant, jo crec que això és una cosa que en aquest moment tenir el quart premi i tindrem un període màxim de 2 anys. Aquesta tesi que aquest matí ha sigut premiada existirà ja com a llibre de la sèrie d'Arquia i això també estableix un sistema de continuïtats. Segurament el fet que el premi porta per això el nom de Manuel de Solà-Morales perquè ell tenia una especial obsessió que l'acadèmia era l'element important. En fons, en una professió com la nostra, és cert que la professió té una amplitud enorme i cada vegada es pot dir, a vegades es diu l'arquitecte serveix de molt poc, l'arquitecte serveix de molt i cada vegada està en més camps. I si ho fem bé, jo crec que es demostraria que és una de les professions i uns dels camps de coneixement on probablement més falta fa, diguéssim, sobre l'execució de les obres, sobre el seguiment de les obres, sobre el manteniment, però també sobre la discussió dels projectes per què són d'una manera o d'una altra o per què s'ha d'invertir d'una forma o d'una altra. És evident que les cívites, la ciutat és una matèria política, és evident, però no podem pensar que els polítics estan preparats per fer-ho tot. Per tant, l'assessoria als polítics són els tècnics preparats per tenir una visió àmplia i em sembla que aquí hi ha poques carreres o professions, knowledge, diuen en anglès, que siguin tan ben preparades com la dels arquitectes. I això em remeto, perquè em sembla que és una discussió que està molt clara. Bé, el motiu pel qual soc aquí és perquè haig d'introduir el Vittorio. Vittorio és ara jo deia, una figura, jo m'atreviria a definir-la, és un bon amic, però sobretot és una figura europea, perquè és algú que, tenint una formació com a arquitecte de la Sapienza, va acabar l'arquitectura i va fer el doctorat a Stuttgart, per tant ja vol dir una persona que coneix molt bé Barcelona, coneix molt bé la situació francesa i sobretot ha tingut un desenvolupament, diguéssim, crític i professional molt basat entre aquesta realitat centreeuropea. Per tant, en aquest sentit jo crec, i abans ara ho dèiem, una persona també per les llengües que no només parla sinó que entén, és un personatge totalment europeu, en aquest sentit tenir aquesta capacitat. I jo voldria destacar aquí punts que em semblen molt importants. El Vittorio va ser un personatge molt clau en un dels episodis europeus més importants que va ser la transformació de Berlín quan encara era un element separat del Berlín que avui dia coneixem. Per tant, el període del Berlín, del IBA, de Berlín 84-87, el Vittorio era una de les persones claus, seguint darrere un altre personatge que vull comentar, que era el Josep Plau Claius. Per tant, jo crec que aquella experiència, que jo crec que després tot el que va passar a Barcelona, no podíem dir que inventàvem coses tan clares, sinó que la idea de la ciutat, construir la ciutat en la ciutat, és una que vam aprendre de Berlín, quan Berlín era una illa separada del reste d'Europa. Per tant, aquest esforç i aquesta aposta metodològica que l'IBA va fer, l'IBA va fer a Berlín, em sembla que és una que encara avui dia en som hereus. No només perquè ells van ser capaços de juntar i posar arquitectes pràcticament de totes les tendències d'una manera conflictiva i junta, i pensem que l'IBA és una operació fonamentalment privada, perquè a vegades es diu tot això ho fan sempre perquè tenen molts diners els alemans. No, tots els edificis que hem vist pujar a Berlín finalment era un privat el que els feia. El que passa és que el sector públic li aportava els bons arquitectes i llavors el privat acabava elegint aquell projecte i executant-lo, però tenia que seguir el projecte del senyor X, que en aquell moment havia sigut triat. En aquest sentit, la cooperació públic-privada i aquesta pèrdua de por per entendre que al privat també se li poden posar regles, i regles que són transparents i que obliguen a tots els privats i que a la vegada no bloquegen el mercat, són coses que les vam aprendre de Berlín, IBA, i el nostre conferenciant d'avui en va ser un personatge clau. Després va treballar molt de temps amb Domus i sobretot va ser director del Museu Alemà d'Arquitectura de Frankfurt, que és un element fonamental també com els museus d'arquitectura i probablement com el possible futur museu d'arquitectura català o espanyol es pugui desenvolupar. En Vittorio té molta experiència sobre això. Per deixar-li a ell només part d'aquesta contribució, jo volia... Tu capisci el mio catalano, no? No, però m'estimo més fer-ho en català perquè també ho podem entendre més bé. Jo llavors volia mencionar, ell té molts llibres, però volia mencionar dos més recents que a mi em sembla que ens donen una mica una altra dimensió d'aquest personatge, una dimensió molt polièdrica perquè té molts angles. Ell, després de tenir aquesta experiència com a director del Museu de Frankfurt, sobretot és conegut per ser catedràtic de l'escola de Zuric, catedràtic de teoria de història i sobretot de teoria enfocada en l'urbanisme i el disseny urbà. Llavors això li va permetre produir una sèrie de llibres, però jo voldria destacar-ne dos més recents. Un és un compendi de la majoria, per no dir de tots els manuals europeus. És un llibre espectacular. El llibre és Manual Zoom Statubau. I think this is a masterpiece because of the way you put them together. I think that's very good. In a way that then we can see how you, Vittorio, you were able to imagine how the French were starting with enfant. As the way, even today when we are designing a public space, we always have this idea of cataloging everything. And then from the catalog, I can pick up the things and then using that properly. That is what enfant was able to produce. I think this is amazing. But putting them together, I mean, this is an immense piece of work. I think that should be probably in English or should be in Spanish as well. And the other one is probably, I don't know if that the last one, Vittorio, but the last I know is a radical normal, which in fact I think it's very important to put these two words together, radical and normal, to make, if you want, the radical attitude something that we can do continuously. We can become normal from the radical. I think this is a revision. The subtitle is Proposition for the Architecture of the City. Remember, architecture of the city is the keywords that probably we learned from Rossi, but in a way that is putting that together, making a lot of reference. I think this is if there are some PhD students here that they are working on this type of subject, I do really recommend this radical normal that exists in English and is very good. Apart from that, I think Vittorio is a person that is able to make it very simple, the writing, the teaching, and building. And I think this is what is very interesting, because probably those are the fields that we as architects and urban designers, we never try to avoid. Perhaps sometimes we try to spend more time on writing, discussing, having a critical position. But at the same time, we know that we want to do that because we like to build or make possible that somebody else is building the city. In a way, that is the way. That is the way that I like to introduce a good friend, but somebody that has this enormous capacity, and probably this is what when we are remembering with the prize Manuel Solà-Morales, what we learn from him is the way that there is no one way to be in the academia just thinking academia is something that is isolated from reality. No, academia is part of the reality, and academia should be to create new ways of intervening into reality yourself, or trying to be able to induce that somebody else is doing. And that's the reason that I welcome Vittorio. You have the floor for you, and we are eager to see what you can propose today. Thank you, Vittorio.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, for this very nice introduction, of which I understood almost everything. And I apologize for speaking the wonderful international language that we have, bad English. We had a discussion with Ron said, speak Spanish, because he's a good friend, so he overestimates my capabilities enormously. Then we said Italian. In fact, it's prepared in Italian, but then I heard maybe English is best, so I would go on with this, if you agree, and if we have a discussion, which I hope we do. I don't know if it's usual here, but I hope we do. Of course, everybody speaks his own language, including Catalan. I was interested in or what I thought might be a possible contribution, also with the background of the Solà-Morales prize, which is really about the knowledge of the city and about enhancing and strengthening this knowledge. And I would like to try to show how the knowledge of the city, let's say, my opinion of how the knowledge of the city can be achieved and accumulated, and how it can be transmitted, transformed into real project. Because as Ran said, finally, I mean, we are interested in knowledge, we are interested in culture, but finally we want to build. And if we have the luck of being able to build, that's what we like to do. So let me see if I can. So how does one absorb the knowledge of the city? I think it's about observation, about living in the city. It's about studying the history of the city, and it's about inserting this knowledge into, let's say, genealogies, into a development, a historical development that explains why things are done in a specific way and not in another one. I would like to show just a few ways of I think it works, or I would like to invite you to visit with me a piece of a city. It's in Florence. It's the square. Is there a pointer here? No, but I don't need a pointer. It's this square here. It's so big that it's very easy. It's this Piazza della Repubblica, so it's not an important square or let's say it's not one of the famous squares in Florence. So it's not Piazza della Signoria, which you have here, Piazza Santa Annunziata, which is on top there. It's a very normal square. It looks like this, but if you walk there, you can start seeing. Yes, the proportions, how the houses are made, how the streets come in, the corners of the square. I go very, very, very quickly. There would be a lot to say. The arcades, how they are proportioned, designed, the floor, all these kind of details. I think there's nothing more, let's say, more effective than walking through a city and observing it with open eyes. But to open your eyes, it's useful to know the history of the city. I say this also because I have been teaching this for about 25 years. So if one knows that Piazza della Repubblica originally was the Mercato Vecchio, which is here in photographs of the late 19th century, then and looked like that in the fabric of the city, then it was, let's say, basically all the quarter was torn down, a very typical transformation of the city in the 19th century to create a new, larger, of course, square, of course, dedicated to the king, whose name was Vittorio, so it's a very nice coincidence. And basically it's a big speculation to build all these red pieces that you can see on this plan. It's a rather long story, like many Italian stories. There were a few competitions. They were not satisfied with the outcome of the competitions for the let's say for the houses, for the buildings on the square. So this is one with the big arcone, yes, and that's, you know, when you know this history, again, it's not just to know the history, it's really to open your eyes and to have the capability of looking a little bit clearer at things. And then one has, or one can ask himself, where does this idea of the square come from? Basically, where is it? What is the main idea of tearing down a piece of a city, creating a big public space that is square with the streets coming in a certain ways, and again there is a kind of it was influenced by models that were pretty clear at the time and that are still clear. So one of the models is Place des Vosges in Paris, which was built by Henri IV as basically as an internal space. It has also some political ideas. He wanted all the aristocrats, the Paris aristocrats, to live on one public space, so they would talk to each other, and that he would be also able to control them a little bit more. Then this didn't work out. I won't tell the whole story, but I'm talking more about the morphological model of this idea of a very regular square. That's the way how it looks like. You can see it's originally it was a series of independent houses that were linked together by this arcade and by this absolutely homogeneous facade. And again, this square has its own example, and so an example is the square that you can see here in this drawing. It's the Piazza Ducale in Vigevano, which was really cut in. This drawing is quite interesting, I think, because it was cut into the fabric of the city. And the fabric of the city is just not shown in the drawing because they didn't care too much about it. And it was originally meant to be a completely regular space with a dome a little bit that was existing already, so it was a little bit off axis, and it was meant to be a kind of entrance to this large court, which was a castle. So the square was not, let's say, a place for the citizens. It was really an entrée for the prince or the duke in this case. You probably all know this. The square is pretty beautiful. It's absolutely regular, and again, it had a lot of influence on the Place Royale, so Place des Vosges, which we have seen before, and you could go on with this influences quite a lot, because again, the proportions of Piazza Ducale are exactly the proportions that Vitruvius indicates for the Roman Forum. So the Roman Forum in this case, the Forum of Augustus, was again a basic element. I mean, this was very simplified. I have to say the genealogy is much more complex and much richer, of course. But this was not my. It was just one small theme that I have for this evening. So once you have this knowledge, you want to use it, and in order to use it, you systematize it. You put it into a system. It was basically what Ron was saying before. You put it into a manual, into a handbook that is a kind of catalog of many solutions that can be used. I really liked a lot your definition, Ron, because it's an unorthodox definition, because normally when you hear the word handbook or manual, you think, there is somebody who wants to tell you how things should be done. But I agree with you and tend to understand these manuals as instruments to make knowledge available. So in a rather open way. Of course, it's the knowledge that you have, so it's not objective, clearly. But it is not about, giving indications so that everybody should design like you do. At least this is what I would like to see in this wonderful books, which all. It begins a little bit with Vitruvius, then of course there's Battista Alberti, who explains very precisely the possible elements of the city. Then you have Alphand. Alphand is really a classic now, because he basically works on the Paris of the Second Empire. Does a lot of he has a big staff. Does a lot of interventions in the city, and then he collects them. He collects basically all things that he has done already in this wonderful volume. It's a fantastic volume, Promenade de Paris, which is done in such a way. So you really have the plans, the sections, you really have the instrument. So if you want to, let's say, to repeat the Boulevard d'Italie, for instance, you have it here. You have it with all measures, with exact sections, including the sewage underneath. And then there are many others. Richard Baumeister, very. It's the German manual, very from the engineering point of view, but interested in the way squares are designed, not for the sake of space, for the sake of traffic and good circulation. And exactly the opposite in some way is Camillo Sitte's Städtebau. This was we would say today a bestseller, written in 1889, and starting this idea, the idea of an artistic view of the spaces of the city. So he also designed squares, but with a total different eye and with a total different intentions. He analyzes mostly Italian squares and tries to extract from them. He also says explicitly so in his text. He says, if we look at beautiful squares of the past, then we should be able to extract from them the rules to produce beautiful squares also in the present, which is a very dangerous but also very fascinating attitude. And then there is Stüben, der Städtebau, part of an enormous encyclopedic project of this the handbook of architecture, which really kind of sums up the knowledge of his time, and has this beautiful sections of basically all the streets look that he picks up all over Europe, or at least where he gets the material. And then finally the American Vitruvius, so Hegeman and Pietz in 22. They change their attitude. They don't, let's say, look at generic elements like the street, the square, but they look at real episodes. So they call, in the preface, Hegeman writes, it's a thesaurus. It's a thesaurus, it's a kind of collection for imaginary travel through the city in time. And so you see what they do. They really collect projects. So they're not so interested in the same scale. They're not interested in the sections of Stuben. It's really just a collection of projects ranging really from antiquity to their time. So the 20s. Organized according to themes. Of course, here again we have the theme of the square, and the theme of the square is broad, or it's interpreted in such a broad way that even the Sapienza by Moromini in Rome is considered, the courtyard of the Sapienza in Rome is considered a square. In my work at ETH, I had the ambition to create a handbook. John has already mentioned it in a very flattering way. Of course, we didn't want, to create any norms or to imitate or to go on in this tradition of manuals. We collected, let's say, what we considered in a very subjective and fragmentary way interesting squares and interesting streets. These were the two issues that we had, and how should I say? We analyzed it. We dismembered them into different aspects and pieces, just showing what they are. I go back to Piazza Repubblica just for simplicity's sake, just to show you, let's say, the things that we were interested in, and what we tried to do. So basically, we drew every. It was a project with the students. It was a kind of research project that we did together with the students, and so we draw, for instance, let's say what we considered an important piece of Florence and of many other cities, all in the scale of 1 to 10,000. We decided that was a good scale to show the integration or non-integration of a certain element in the city. Then we went on to the scale of 1 to 2,000. So it's very strict. It's very Swiss. We did it for every single element. So in the scale of 2,000, we think you are able already to understand, let's say, the dimensions of the space, the relationship with the city, the dimensions of the houses towards the open space. I think that's a very important information that you need to have. And then we went on to the scale 1 to 500, and 1 to 500 allows you to insert also the typologies of the houses. We were not so interested in typologies of the houses, but we were interested in the relationship of the buildings and, of course, the ground floors to the public space. How this public space or how these buildings interact with this public space. So these were this kind of drawings that we produced for that, and so ground floor and normal, regular floor, and then we went into the scale 1 to 100 or even 1 to 50 for the details. Some people think it's my obsession. Of course, it's not. It's very objective. No, I think that these details are very, very important for, how should I say, for the character of the public spaces. So the paving, the lamps, the design of the floor, of the arcade, all these kind of things I think they need to be shown and drawn. And we did this for yes, and then we had, of course, some photographs and some historical drawings. And we did this for quite a lot of elements, and therefore a lot of city. And we found out that by putting, I mean, that there are two levels. One is to understand the square. You need to go from, let's say, from the big city scale to the detail. I mean, this is what I assume. we can discuss it. But then, if you put these different elements that were chosen with a certain ratio, of course, together, then you can begin to compare them. And comparing means go much deeper in the understanding of the qualities of these elements. So this is just a selection of the scales of the drawings 1 to 10,000, which are very interesting, I think. First of all, because they show that some squares are very integrated in the city fabric. So you discover immediately some specific squares. If you want to look at the Piazza Navona, you discovered it immediately in the form of the city. Already in other instances, it becomes a little bit more complicated, and you don't really. You don't find immediately the square that is a subject matter, because it's just one of many squares. It's really cut somewhere into the city fabric. And also this comparison. I mean, this is all the same scale. Shows a lot of things about the size of the squares, but also the density of the city and let's say the texture of the city. And this game of comparing can go on, on all these levels. Now you see, for instance, the different squares drawn again exactly in the same scale, and all of a sudden you discover somehow, how small Vigevano is, basically. If which you see here compared with the big square of the castles, which I mentioned before, and compared with the English square, this Bedford Square or Place des Vosges, which are much bigger. Which is something, to me, it was a discovery, because I wasn't really aware of this difference. And here again, the relationship of the buildings and of the floor plans of the buildings and the public space. And here again, a comparison. It's always the same scale. The comparison of the single details. This briefly as let's say, as my proposal of a way to achieve the knowledge or to enhance, let's say, the knowledge of the city. Of course, there are many other ways, but this to me, to us, to the group with whom I worked or still work, it was a way of understanding the city, not in an academic way or not in an abstract way, but very, let's say, aimed at the craftsmanship of urban design, which I consider a craft. And now I would like to show you how now it becomes even more subjective, if possible. Because I will show you how I understood the possibilities of translating this knowledge, this experience, and this understanding of the city, of the square in this case, to 5 new squares or that are embedded into 5 projects that we did. This is the campus of Novartis in Basel. Very briefly, a very nice site on the Rhine, which you can see on the right. Industrial site, ex-industrial site, still an industrial site. Already, this was the situation when we started on this work, which was, wow, 20 years ago, so you understand how venerable my age is by now, and also how long urban projects go. You know it very well, Juan. So it was already, let's say, there was already a transformation of a mere industrial site into a mix. So it was laboratory, it was production, but it was also laboratories, it was offices, there was the headquarter building, which is here in the center, and all pretty chaotic, frankly. And of course, also the rails and all what belongs to industry. And this, now we jump 20 years. This is basically the situation now, a few years ago, actually, because some things have changed, where we have started to build quite a number of new buildings, especially here along this main street. The basic idea, I will jump quickly. The basic idea was to create a very clear master plan, invite different architects, basically from all over the world, give them pretty strict rules, and substitute every building that would become obsolete with a new building, but not tear down any building that was still functioning, only when they become obsolete. I'm stressing this, it seems like self-explanatory. It is not, because for a firm like Novartis, a building that is between 15 and 20 years old, let's say on their balance, it's worth nothing, it's worth zero. Some of these buildings are perfectly in good shape, but for them, they're worthless. And so I said, we can turn down so we can realize your master plan. So it was a lot of discussion. We had a lot of discussion about this. But in any case, we managed then to do it rather slowly, with many pretty important architects working in this master plan, including this one. Of course, every architect told me it's wonderful that you have a strict master plan, and it's very important that everybody respects the master plan. But my building is in a very specific situation, and so it has to, to do something different from the master plan. So it was a difficult balance. We built a building ourselves, an office building, that was in some way a kind of metaphor of the whole master plan. We created this long stair that is like a central street, and to the left and to the right you have the offices, so that people can see each other, and can actually also climb the stair and not take the elevator. This is the first sketch. This is basically what I was trying to tell you. The idea of a very strict master plan. It was published in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. It was a disastrous criticism. They said it's the most boring plan, because it was a grid, and grids are very boring, no? And also you in Barcelona, when you have this grid by Cerdà, it's really terrible. It's always the same. No, I'm teasing. I'm joking, of course. But in any case, the idea was a very strict plan, rather small buildings to be very flexible. And every building should high density. So the streets are pretty narrow. It's 10 meters. Most of the streets, except this main street here, which is Fabrikstraße, which is a kind of historical street of the plant, and that we kept and made a kind of central street. But every building should have at least on one side a green space, so kind of either a square or a park, in order to give a little bit more breadth to the whole situation. The master plan. This is the master plan. To be more precise, this is part of the evolution of the master plan. How it changed in time. Such a firm is very dynamic, so they have different needs. Things change. So we try to keep, let's say, the main principles while changing. While complying basically with the needs of the firm. The size, just to give you an idea, it's not small. It's 25 hectares and 10,000 people basically. 10,000 people who work there. So it's laboratories and offices, no residences. And a completely closed off city because of the problem of production of chemicals, but especially because of the fear of these people too, that somebody may steal their secret formulas. We tried to, as you can see, especially here and here, we tried really to connect it, nevertheless, with the fabric of the city. And this is a small triumph that I have to share with you, because I always said that the city will be stronger than these ideas of protection and defense and the wall. And when we started this, we were forbidden to say something like that, because I said, no, it must be absolutely secure, it must be closed off. And 3 months ago, it opened up, and now it's public, because nobody could enter it basically without high permission. Now they've opened it up. Nothing has, and many of them said, "Oh, something terrible will happen." Absolutely nothing has happened. It's just much more alive and much nicer. It has restaurants, it has shops. It's really a small city, so it works perfectly as a small city. This is the master plan as it is. Let's say the more actual and real master plan. And in this plan here, in this area, we created a square that looks like this. We called it the forum. Basically it's the main square of the small city where they meet, and it is also some representative. Has a representative function because this is the headquarters, so where the top executives work, and this is how we design it in a very simple way. It's just a few trees, a big pool in the middle, and I have to say it worked very nicely because it became all of a sudden a kind of really a public space, or a place where, as you can see, the employees meet. They meet for drinks. They meet to work. It works basically like a square, I think, should work. We were careful, of course, to put a restaurant and a bar on the ground floor, so that it's activated, and now the trees are a little bit higher, and it's quite a nice space. This was a very luxury project that I just showed to you. This Novartis, we had really a lot of money, and especially it was not a speculation project. It was not to make money, but it was to create a good working environment for the people working in this pharmaceutical industry. The second project that I show you is, it came a little later, is pure speculation. It's this site here. It's about 7 hectares, so smaller than Novartis. It was bought by a private developer, and this private developer made a competition. The context is, as you can see, pretty awful. It's right at the border, at the city borders of Zurich, so it's very near the city. With a train, you're there in 7 minutes. You're in the center of the city, but it's pretty rural. It has one of the first and most successful shopping malls in Europe. To the shopping mall belongs this wonderful parking garage. And you have whatever you want. Now you have the highway. You have a fast road. You have the rail. You have another shopping mall. And what you don't see here, they build it afterwards, is a tram line that goes basically in this direction. So you also have the tram. You really have, everything. We won the competition. Oh, I'm jumping a little bit. Not with this project. Similar, but we had to correct it a lot. It did have some mistakes, I think, at the beginning. It probably still has some. But our idea was to create a rather introvert piece of a city, also to protect the houses and especially the residences from the noise around, which is remarkable. We said there are 3 points of connections. One is on top there, that's the station. The other one is here. That's the station of the tram that I told you about. This is the tram line, the new tram line, and this is a bus station that is just adjacent to the shopping mall. So we created a grid. Let's say it's a deformed grid, deformed by these 3 points, and where these lines meet, we created a small square. This was an interesting experience because the developer said, "You're doing a square. I mean, this is it's square meters. It's all revenue," but we managed to convince him that even the British speculators of the 18th century decided to have squares to raise basically the value of the real estate value, so we convinced them to do it. It's residential. It has big courtyards because you can't have the program was residential workspaces and almost 50%, which is not very good. One should have much more residential than workspaces, but it's also not so bad because at least it's a mix. And then a small park, and we said we don't want to do a small park somewhere. We prefer to have larger courtyards and put the park, let's say, make a kind of addition of parks in the courtyards, so where the green is protected from the noise of the outside. So this is what came about. This is how it looks now, and the architectures are from different architects, but in this case we managed to do workshop with the architects so that coordinated is a big word, but we tried, to create less a kind of exhibition, architectural exhibition, the scale 1-to-1 like Novartis, but more a real urban quarter. Here you can see let's say the green spaces that are all connected by doors here under the buildings, so that you basically can walk from one courtyard to the other, and this is our building. It's the facade on, let's say, on the main street. We have an arcade. It's all very basic. I mean, we had a very strict budget, but we managed to do these shutters. We managed to do the lamps in the proper way. We managed to have a little bit natural stone until here, and we managed especially to have a very homogeneous and rather radical facade after a lot of discussions, because it's so boring, such a strict facade. And we managed to create this square, which you can see here in the drawing. Very, very simple, just an open space with a few trees, with a fountain. The idea is also to have markets there, which are happening. So it should be, very, very not designed, and not occupied by stuff. And that's how it looks today. As you can see, we did not really succeed in coordinating all the architects, because we just said, let's do buildings of made in stone or plaster, so very, very low down materials, and not a glass building. But of course, here we have a glass building with stone serigraphed on the glass, which was not exactly what we hoped we would get, but you always have a few exceptions. And also, I think a good city should be able to bear these exceptions. The third example, are we in time, more or less, or?
We can speed up a little bit.
Okay, I can speed up. The third example is a building in Zurich. Basically, this is just a building. It's not, because these two examples were really about urban design. This is just a building that had to substitute this building here that had to be torn down, and this building here that was obsolete in a very beautiful ex-industrial area. This is a very important building in Zurich. It's an old. It's the place where they built the ships, which is a strange idea to have ships in Switzerland. But on the lakes, of course, they need ships, and they were manufactured here. This is our building. What it does. Or what we were interested in trying to do, it creates a square here that was not existent before. So we concentrated the building very much on, we made it pretty high and dense, but we concentrated on this side to have a square here, and to have also a second small secret square here. It has two courtyards, very small courtyards, and it has this small dotted lines are for us very important. On the ground floor, you can pass from the square to the courtyards and to the street. This is the plan. I won't go in. Well, no, I will go a little bit into that. You can see these are the courtyards. This is a ground floor plan. These are the courtyards, and you can see how we managed to open them up towards the city. This is how it looks now. You can see the square. You can see with a cafe, and here you can see the opening into the courtyard, and from the courtyard you can also reach the next street. And this is the kind of, let's say, permeability that we were interested in, also in architectural terms, in which I will not go. And this, I think, makes the very narrow courtyard bearable, because they are narrow, but on the ground floor you can see through them, and that makes it a little bit more generous and not just light wells, which they basically are. This is the building, how it looks in the relationship to these incredible trees that we managed not to let die. And the Schiffbau building, which I told you about, it is now a restaurant, theater, and things like that. And now the last, which is for me very important. This is so. Until now we were lucky because these were competitions. We won them. We built them. Doesn't happen every day in an architect's life. This is more typical. This is a competition that we lost. And I'm very sad about it because I'm interested in the concept. The concept is, I have the German text. I apologize for that. I just took the images from the competition plates. It's an urban quarter in Hamburg. Very low density, the 50s, this idea of a very low density city with a lot of green and houses maximum 4 stories and pretty wide as row houses, basically. The brief was to put into this new quarter, together with a transformation that would happen anyway because they are building a subway line in this place, to put there between 3,000 and 4,000 new residences, new apartment, which is quite a lot. So, but it's an interesting task, I think, how to densify a peripheric urban quarter that has been conceived as not dense at all. Because it was conceived in the 50s, where the ideology was have a lot of green spaces and very spread out. And you see, it is not so bad. I mean, it is not something that one would do today, but it's not so bad. And socially, it's pretty good because it's very inexpensive. So it's affordable housing. So this is just images. I mean, this is not a city that I would advocate, but I think it has qualities that we cannot just ignore. And it has these enormous parks and so on. So we read the whole thing. We tried first of all to understand what it is, and we read it as a kind of collage of different big islands, all made by you can see by this. This is all one family houses. This was actually not part of the brief, and these are just row houses, partially 3-story high, 4-story high, something like that. Partially in good shape, partially not in good shape, and the whole thing is connected by a street that is called Mansardallee, and we said, why not use this street that is already there, and that's also the place where the subway will come, as a kind of connection of 2 squares. I'm a bit fanatic about squares, yes, I know. So I'll make it brief because it's a rather thorough study of all the green spaces that were existing that we could enhance. A study of the Mansardallee itself. We didn't want to do a boulevard. We wanted to do a kind of elongated public space with very low speed and a lot of space for slow traffic and pedestrians. This is how we thought this Mansardallee could look like, also in relationship to the old buildings that you can see, especially here. the new buildings, to which I will come in a minute. And we said we want to pursue a few strategies. One strategy is 3 strategies basically. One is to have this Mansardalee as a kind of backbone, also as a social backbone, public's backbone of the quarter. Second strategy, to improve what is there. So for instance, this is a part of the situation that we have, and we said, why don't we just do the green space is a little bit better. We put playgrounds, we enhance the street, but we leave the buildings as they are. Also because, well, first of all, because they're cheap in terms of rent, but also because they have a certain logic. I mean, they were done by architects who thought something different than we think, but thought something. And the third strategy, but we still had the problem, where do we put this 3,000 to 4,000 new apartments? And we said we can put them all along. We put them along Mansardalee as injections of urbanity, as larger blocks. This is now really a collage. I've taken some urban blocks. Maybe you can recognize some of them, and just collage them as a kind of conceptual idea. And this is now already the transformation of this idea. And basically it concentrates in this area here. This is the first subway station. In this area here, it's the second subway station. And then we said, where the old buildings are obsolete, they could be substitute. So when you substitute the old buildings that are very low, you substitute them with really urban blocks and are not afraid of the clash between the two. And again, briefly, just the transformation of one of the square, the last square on the right. You can see in yellow the existing buildings. You can see in red what we propose. So it's a big change of scale, of course. A study of the trees. We didn't want to tear trees down, so in a way we designed along, because the trees are, if you've seen in the photographs, are really very old and beautiful. The uses, it's all basically residential, just the ground floors are shops, and the yellow is offices. The traffic was very important for us. We really wanted to create a knot in this square, climate proposals and so on. And this is what we then finally propose. So it's really you can see here the different of scale. These are 3 stories. These are 6 stories. So it's really a clash. We said the clash is necessary. If you want to densify, you have to densify. This is the block structure, and again a low blob into the square, showing a little bit what kind of functions, the traffic functions, the market functions, the public functions that we thought would be possible. It was not appreciated by the jury, who said, no, it's much better to be more light-handed and put 2 floors more on the existing slabs. I still think it's a possible, at least, strategy. So I'm very glad I could share it with you, and I hope I was able to show that there is a link between history and let's say present design, and that the knowledge of the city does help. I mean, it's not the solution. It's not, it's not a formula. But I think it does help to do an urban design that is a little bit more reflected and does not experiment too much on the shoulders of the people who have to live there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I think it's perhaps if we have time for 2 or 3 questions, if there are a few questions, I think we can take advantage of yeah. Yes, yes. Okay.
There's a
Yeah. Hello. First of all, thank you for your wonderful presentation, because I really enjoyed how you went through this idea of transposing knowledge from academia or from learning towards urban projects, which is the objective. But I also wanted to ask, is it possible to also construct these genealogies of knowledge and transpose them to other cultures or emerging cities that maybe don't have so much in common with our way of developing urbanity?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. To be frank, I don't know. I'm serious. I don't know doesn't mean yes or no. It means I don't know. I suspect, or let's say, I believe that it is possible. I even suspect that a lot of things that we, let's say, take from our European cities that are, of course, European, so we know what that means, are fairly generic, and can be, because this idea of having places where people gather, not so larger, so the square basically, is something that every community needs, and of course, a square in Spain looks different from a square. Well, not so much a square in Italy, a little bit, but not just. But a square in Switzerland, better example. And clearly, a square in Asia or in Africa will look different. But I would venture. But as I said, I don't know. But I would venture. When you look at the favelas, for instance, now they are self-organized. They are not really planned. I would even question if they are not completely not planned. But in any case, they are mostly self-organized. And in any case, they don't start with the plan like Vigevano or Florence. But you can see that they form squares, they form streets, they form slowly, even if everything is more or less private at the beginning, but they form, let's say, public or communal spaces, and I think that's the main issue, so I think it's not. Let's put it this way. I think that the study of the European city is not useless, even if you start to work in different cultural contexts.
Thank you.
Vittorio, many thanks for this very, very complete, I would say, presentation, like mixing many things that drive us to certain echoes, on our obsession for mixing different scales, from the the city decisions to the materiality, no? Something that we have also learned from Manuel Solà a lot on his obsession in the last first stage of his career on this materiality, no? So I like it a lot. I was not so familiar with the approach to the manuals, and I like it a lot when you are saying something that I really appreciate. Manual understood as pieces to make knowledge available, not toolkits. No? So I don't know which is your perception from your very high culture on this approach on manuals. For example, on some recent approaches like this obsession for the codes, no? The current codes. In a certain way, when you were explaining some of your projects, urban projects, you're talking about the rules being strict and not strict. No? So I would like to know a bit more your experience as urban designer, how you, which is your position in regards what must at the urban scale, and in regards or in dialogue with architectural project, what should be defined or not, no? So this was one of the things, I guess, it's very interesting to know from your own experience in these amazing urban projects.
Thank you for the question. Another good and also another difficult question. I personally, even if I see that there are some quite good results with the codes and with, let's say, with restrictions on materials and so on, there are also some very bad results, as we all know. I think we should I think urbanism needs rules, clearly. But I think we should only give the rules that have a logic. And logic is the connection between buildings, is creating spaces for the community, for very specific functions that go from the market to a party to, I don't know. So this means that things like alignments, the division between public and not public, traffic and so on, make sense. I also think that the limitations in height, I'm very interested in that, make sense because I think you can design, I hope you can design a street that is only 10 meters wide, which we did both in Novartis and in Richti, but only if the houses are 25 meters, more or less now, high. If this houses become 40 meters, it doesn't work anymore. No, the proportions then don't work anymore. I mean, also very practical things don't work anymore. You don't get enough sunlight into the first floors. So these limitations, yes. Limitations about materials, for instance. I mean, it's in the historical city, of course, there were these limitations. Siena is all built in brick because basically you don't have stone quarries nearby, but you have a lot of brick production, so that makes a lot of sense. But nowadays, what sense does it make to say use only brick or use only terracotta when we know very well that we can get stones from China very cheaply, which we probably shouldn't do, but for other reasons. Get them. But I think these rules are broken, and the Richti we did not. The rules were very elementary, not really just the alignments. Also, there were also rules that we needed for let's say for legal reason. But all the rest, like the materials, like the shape of the window, standing or fenêtre en longueur. This is something that we discussed in a very open way. We made proposals, but we discussed in a very open way with the other architects, and that was a good process.
you so much for your presentation. I would like just if you could share with us some thoughts about this contemporary city and what is happening around with these metropolitan areas and all the expansion of cities, because it is very interesting the way you place this parallel between the lessons we can retrieve from history and then how can we approach and explore these kind of rules and methodologies in order to plan urban projects today. But when we look around what is happening around with the cities and all this, but still people are gathering there, but maybe the spaces and those gathering places and squares are not the same as the ones we see in the historical cities, as you showed with us. But what kind of reflections and approach would you recommend in a time like this, when we are looking on how to act and how to redesign also spaces in the peripheries of where this kind of regular areas, as in the city centers, they are not there. Maybe there is a certain regularity that we are not still understanding, but there is some changes that we also need to decodify, and I would appreciate your thought on
that. Thank you. Third, difficult, good, but maybe the most difficult question. It's a compliment that I'm paying to you because it's an absolutely crucial question. I can answer it only very, again, even more subjectively than I answered the rest of the question. Personally, I don't believe that the periphery, including Honergeest, let's take this as example, can teach us nowadays any lesson. I'm a little bit blunt, a little bit maybe too blunt, but I think it's a totally wrong concept. It's a concept that we cannot afford anymore. We cannot afford it for financial reasons. It's very expensive. I mean, the traffic is very expensive. We cannot afford it for energy reasons. It costs approximately double from 3 times the energy of a compact city. And I also think we cannot afford it socially because we cannot afford a city where everybody can move around only by car or by complicated public transport. I really think we need to concentrate. So that's in a way the sense of our proposal for Honergeest is to say the new squares, the new buildings, but also the new squares are those of the compact city, and we're not afraid of, let's say, of imitation, because we think there's such a big range of possibilities and challenges that we're not afraid of that. What I do believe, however, is that there are places of agglomeration in the periphery, and it really depends on, let's say, on the specific situation. Now here we said, since there is this subway and since there is this need to densify substantially, we can implant a new city into the periphery. Where we cannot do that, we tried to do that with the students. I think we need to observe the places of agglomeration, of exchange, the public spaces, the communal spaces, and to like acupuncture now with very small and very cheap interventions, make them a little better. But frankly, I think this is a temporary solution. But I don't think I really think we need to transform this periphery with this very, very low density into something dense. because we cannot we cannot live anymore consuming all this energy, all this and all this landscape. It's just impossible. We really have to change our state of mind. But on the other hand, we also that's why I say it's a very tricky question. But also, I don't think we can start destroying all this stuff because it's there. People live there. They live well, more or less. In any case, they live cheaply, which is very important in a city in our world. So it's a very delicate balance act. And I think we need time. We cannot speed up these processes. But I am convinced that once, let's say, these elements, these islands, how we call them, become obsolete, they need to be substituted by a compact city, by fragments of a compact city.
Good. Thank you. I think it's, well, Marcelisa? He's going to make even more difficult. Huh?
Thank you, Vittorio. This is an easy question. And it deals just with something that you have shown in the Novartis project. That is how that there was a process from 2001 and 2008. And on that process, there are sort of a basic pattern of the grid. But at the beginning, it seems that they are sort of a diagonal that grows all the area. And maybe this diagonal has disappeared at the last image in 2008. And my question is, what that happens, and what was your feeling about this change? So the disappearing of the diagonal, so that the difference in a sort of a clear grid pattern.
I'm not sure I understood acoustically. The disappearance of what?
A diagonal.
See, that's also a very tricky question.
It's just a practical one.
It's not practical. It's also highly political one. No, I can be very frank. This diagonal was not La Diagonale, but a very important, well, like La Diagonale, a very important connecting street. Actually, it connected nothing less than Switzerland, so Basel, with France. It's because I didn't mention that, but the border, basically, the end of the master plan is the border between the two countries, and I have to say this was totally my mistake. I always draw this street because I thought this street will stay there forever. I mean, it belongs to the city. It's a very important, also historical street. So why worry? I had better worried because at a certain, I don't know exactly what the kind of negotiations that took place, but I'm just an architect. I'm not a politician. But in any case, what happened was that the city of Basel sold to Novartis the street. So Novartis created, let's say, an alternative street because this connection was absolutely necessary. Very awkward, very ugly, and the street disappeared. And then I had my discussion at the time with the boss of Novartis, whom I very much liked and still like, but we did not agree on everything clearly, was we should keep the trace of the street, even if it's not, now not a public street anymore. Remember that all this was closed at the time, but we should keep the trace. Now the buildings should stop. We should not build over the street. But there was nothing to be done. He hated the street, and so the order was the master plan must go over the street. This is an interesting. I didn't even know that it was that it would be possible that a city, so a public, I mean, a city in Europe, in Switzerland, could sell to a private company a street. No, it's like you could sell Passeig de Gracia. I wouldn't advise you to.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, Vittorio. I think it was very clear, and we discovered today that I think Vittorio put on the table something that for me is very important, the idea that urban design is also a craft. We can say that after his presentation, we can say it's a very cultivated craft, because of the way he showed how many layers he was able to put before making the project that you are presented. Thank you very much, Vittorio. I'd like also, if you allow me to say, just to conclude the meeting. I think the lecture was very good. I'd like finally just to thank the sponsors that we always have, and they are backing the fort, but also we hope in the future Manuel Solà-Morales European Prize. I invite also, because I understood that there are also some streaming that probably they are PhD still working, and they can also be presented to compete for the 5th European Prize, we hope, and I think it's very important. I think the fact that we can see that urban design and urbanism is also getting more and more involved in this type of issues, like Vittorio was telling, I think it's very important. Then, as we can see here, we have for the prize gets the support from the COAC, the UPC, the Politècnica de Catalunya, the Àrea Metropolitana de Barcelona, which I think is an Arquia. I think all those are the supports that they are so generous to make it possible that the prize keep going. And I think always the main meat of this prize are the PhD, the thesis, in the way. And we should not forget that what is very important is what we have seen this morning, the quality of the thesis and the way that the thesis are facing new issues, that they are very important. Thanks again, Vittorio, for your help. Grazie.